Introducing the original Blood Clot podcast, not PS. Soothing semantic. Special dedication all the way from New York. Boom! Yeah, man. SWOT semantic. Yeah, me know. Boom! Soothing semantic. Yeah, me know. Big ups to the man, yeah. Soothing semantic.
On another episode of Soothing Semantics, I'm your host, Rafi Pinsky. Make sure to subscribe, like, share. And here we go. Today, I have Nick Davenport on the show. Welcome, man.
Hey, what's up? Nice to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So, Nick is a cognitive coach. He works with all different kinds of athletes, people that many of you probably know, including Dustin Poirier. Dude, it's amazing that I'm such a big fan of his, man.
Oh, really?
Can't wait for him to kick Connor's ass in the third.
I like to hear that. It's awkward if you said you're for Connor. I would have still done it. I'm no hard feelings, but a little awkward.
Dude, you know, I like Connor, but there's just nothing like the second fight, the comeback that he had. I want him to win again, man. Honestly, yeah. I'm definitely Team Dustin on this, man.
Okay, I like it.
Without a question, yeah. I hope to have Connor on at some point anyhow, but like, listen,
hey,
it is what it
you're
is.
Objective. You're just reporting.
I'm still gonna tell him, even if Connor comes out, I'm gonna be like, listen, man, I was rooting for Dustin. It is what it is.
Hey, that's
He's like, the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that guy?
Hey,
yeah.
I like it.
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that?
So you have the floor, brother.
So yeah, so basically, a lot of people see me online, and no one truly knows what I do. Like, they get the concept, you know, cognitive. You hear the word cognitive. It's like, okay, the brain, reaction, decision-making. And that is a big part of it. But I guess here we'll get to talk more deeply about it. So what I do is I put people under different drills and tasks that make them have to think under pressure. And like I said, things like reaction time. So imagine if you're given in a sport 2 or 3 milliseconds to make a decision. And that's not a lot of time, obviously. You can only blink at best in 3 milliseconds. So think about how fast that happens. And you have to make a lot of decisions in that time. You see a pitch coming or a punch or a tackle, whatever it may be. That's the first premise. Can I make you take in that information quickly and not only take it in, make a precise decision that is accurate in that small amount of time? So that's the premise. Take in information, make a goal-directed behavior. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like I say, it's mental too. So are you doing that in a way that is composed? Because people can perform well and be stressed out, and guess what? You only can perform in a stressed state but so long, you know. So I want you to be able to think clearly while you're doing that. So the next play or next fight or whatever it is, you're able to keep that consistent performance. And that's pretty much the premise. Perform consistently, not necessarily your best because no one can be 100% perfect, but be able to perform consistently under stress, lack of resources, and not lose your composure. So that's kind of the premise of what I want to do with my clientele.
And what do you think they're lacking? What do you think an average person might be lacking, say in an athletic field, whether it's fighting or basketball, baseball, football? If they don't go through this kind of coaching, what do you think that they lack that you provide for them?
So I feel it's the lack of repetition, because if you think physical, you can only do so much reps physically, whether it be lifting weights, running sprints. Like, physically, we can maybe do, if I get into like technical terms, because I used to be a strength coach as well back in 2012 to like 2016. Mm-hmm. So in strength conditioning, we want to see how much weight your body can accommodate over time. So let's say in 1 week, you accumulate 20,000 pounds worth of lifting, meaning every rep. So if you have 100 pounds, you lifted X amount of times, you multiply that, that's your volume. So in physical, we can only do so much before your body starts breaking down. The beauty of mental training, you can do so many reps, technically infinite reps. Obviously, we don't have infinite time, but if you could just keep going and going, you wouldn't physically get exhausted. So I think that's the biggest thing that people miss when they think about this type of training, is that you're not limited to the physical limitations of regular fitness or sport performance. And if you're a guy, especially at the higher level like Dustin's and Jared or Rashard Matthews, one of my good friends or clients and now good friends, they have to perform at the peak level, and they've done everything physically. how much faster could Jared really get?
Right.
He's competed at Tulane. How much
crazy, by the
stronger
way.
could his punch?
Real
could
quick,
Dustin,
dude. Well, I saw Jared's run. You know, when he gets started onto the board. I forgot what it's even called. But when he gets on it, I mean, he's bolting, dude.
Oh yeah, he's one of the best push starters, and that comes from his track background. You know, but that's the thing. He's great at that, but how much faster can he get? Dustin, how much harder can he punch? Rashard, how much better can he catch a ball? At that point, unless you're like a high schooler and below, and even high school nowadays are next level. So let's say middle school and below, you're not going to really – the physical is not going to be the difference maker because at the elite level, everyone can run fast, everyone can jump high, everyone can hit hard. The difference is how can I use that? And that's what they're missing if they're not doing this type of stuff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, this is my problem. I'll be a little humble here. It doesn't have to be my methods. Now, granted, I feel I've worked over a decade developing this program, so my methods are pretty good. That's a shameless plug. But it's like if they're not doing this, they're depriving themselves of that opportunity to be able to separate them from what everyone else is doing. Because this is something a lot of parents might not like to hear because they got kids that are coming up, but everyone works hard. The old, just work hard and you'll be the best. Hate to say it, that's a lie. Because I don't think, unless they're a slacker, if you really want it, you're probably working hard and so is a million other kids or a million other athletes. Who's the one doing the thing that's hard, but it's going to elevate them? And that's what this is. This is the elevation past of a physical or tangible realm that the last 30, 40 years you can say has been explored, but it still hasn't really been like blown apart. The mental game is still something we don't really emphasize. And if you do, it's usually like a secret, like, hey, don't tell them what I'm doing. I want to have the edge versus like, no, we all need to do this. Just like I get bigger muscles, I need to get better mental function. And that's something I feel needs to get more emphasis. And that's sad that it doesn't, but hey, hopefully in a few years it'll get there.
Do you think a lot of MMA fighters are implementing it? Is it becoming a lot more common? I
would say, once again, screw it, I'm tooting my horn. I can say from 2017, so I first started with Dustin in 2017, and actually it's a funny story how that went. Should I tell it?
Please.
Might as well.
How would I?
Bro,
I'm
here, right?
waiting for you to tell it. Tell it all, man.
Let's go back to 2017. Mindbody1 on paper started in 2017, but like I said, for the last decade, between my coursework in psychology, I have an undergrad in psychology and master's in exercise science with a specialty in sports psych. I've done over 30, 40 credits at the doctoral level, clinical and personality research. So I have a very diverse, and that's why Mindbody1 was meant to be a full range approach to mental and brain training. So Mindbody1 had been going, and the outlook was different then. It was more like a fitness workout, like say squatting, lifting weights, but in the breaks you would do like a mental puzzle on the app or something. That was the original premise. So along that way, it didn't really take off. And I was like revamping, like, how do I get this more approachable? So I started changing up things and started making the drills more so the emphasis versus doing fitness and just throwing in some thinking in between. So around that time, it was probably, I think, I don't know the exact date, it was like late September, let's say September 25th. And I hit up a good friend of mine, and he's actually a world-renowned strength coach. His name is Phil DeRue, and we went to high school together. We've known each other since 2006 as we're teenagers. And respectively, both went our separate ways in the fitness field. He went more towards MMA, strength conditioning, because he was a fighter for a little bit, and he worked his way up to the pro circuit. But after concussions, he went into strength conditioning. And me, I was doing strength conditioning as well, but I broke into this. This was always my background. So we always stayed in touch. It wasn't like we're calling each other every day, but like we'll stay in touch. So one day I was like, hey, I don't even know why I did it, but something in my head said, because I see him working with all his athletes at American Top Team, and I was like, I think your fighters would like this stuff. He said, bro, I was just talking to Dustin Poirier about this last night. I'm like, really? And full disclosure, this might sound bad, I didn't really follow MMA like that, so I had to look him up.
Oh, you didn't even know who he was at the time.
Yeah, thanks for making it sound like that. Or not as bad, I mean, but I had to look him up, and I'm like, oh wow. So I'm a researcher, so I just want to look him up. I started just getting more like, how could this be something for him? Because when I first said it to him, when I was like, hey, I think your fighters might like it, I didn't really have an outline of what it would be though. I just like, I know this could be something for them, but I don't know where to take it. So when I went in, that was a Saturday, I believe. So that Monday, I'm also a teacher I used to teach at Broward College as an adjunct. So I also taught, at that time I was teaching 6 classes, which in adjunct world, that's a full load. That's a lot of classes for not being full time. So my schedule was packed. So what I did was, since I had more time for Mindbody1, I'll get my schedule loaded on one day, or if not 2 days. So this particular semester, all my classes were Monday. It was a long day. I was going from 9 to 8 with a little break in between. But I had the rest of the week to work on business stuff. So he hits me up and says, hey, can you come by ATT at around 3? And luckily, that was my little hour and a half break period. So I rushed over there, brought my setup, same setup, and he was like, yes, I want this. Come back at 6:30. I'm like, what's happening at 6:30? He said, Dustin will be here, and so it's Fox Sports. I'm like, Fox Sports? He's like, yeah, you don't want to miss this. So I'm thinking like, dang, I got to teach it. That's my main income right now. So it's like,
Dude, I'm stoked that I have you on, man.
it's crazy. A lot of people don't know these stories. Like Instagram, people only see the fun stuff. They don't see the crazy stories that led me to this point. Like I have some stories. But anyway, so my facility at the time, I had a small warehouse facility in Boca. So ATT, American Top Team, is in Coconut Creek. And Broward College North Campus, where I taught, was also in Coconut Creek. So me being the mental guy I'm in my head. How do I map this out so I can get back to the facility, get the rest of my stuff, get back to campus, cancel class, put a sign on the door, and get back to ATT in time. So, hey, it's passed. I don't know the statutes of limitations. Maybe Jared can help me out. I know he's not a criminal lawyer, but I ran almost every light back to my facility. Like, I'm talking about dangerous. I'm not proud of it because it was kind of reckless, but in my head it's like, how many times do you get this opportunity?
Right.
So I actually had a wait, what car did I have? I think I had my Challenger still. So that's a fast car, right?
Yeah.
So I'm rushing through traffic, get to my facility, load up everything.
It's pretty dope, by the way. Adjunct professor driving the Challenger. That's dope.
I got stories about that. I've been pulled over. Like, what do you do? I actually teach out of college. Really? I thought you were a drug dealer or something. No, we're talking but that is not a story. So I rush back to school. I'm literally walking up to my door, putting a sign on the door. Kids are already, or students, because some of them are even older than me. This was 4 years ago, so I was 26 at the time. And it's like, some of them older than me, they're walking up like, what's the problem? I'm like, class, this class will explain later. And then I get to the car, rush back to ATT, get there at 6:15, time to set up. And I can say, be cliche, the rest was history. We did our session, cameras were there, and if you watch it, it's on my YouTube, it was on Fox Sports, ESPN, all that stuff, and I got international exposure. And if you watch it, you wouldn't, if I didn't just tell you this, you wouldn't know that was the first day I met him. And now, mind you, I was nervous as hell, but in my head, I had to, like I said, performing under stress, regardless of situation. So in my head, I was like, the world doesn't need to know this is my first time.
Yeah, definitely.
So you wouldn't see that on the video because I'm on there doing my thing. This is cognitive conditioning. We're going to do this, reaction, decision making. And the rest was history. That was 2017 September. And that's how that all started. And Phil, big shouts to him because it's one thing to be good at what I do, but for someone to believe in me, and obviously since he's my friend, he at least gave me a chance. He knew I was good at what I did. And then shouts out to Dustin, obviously, because he had to like it. It's not like, oh, this is good for you. A lot of athletes get thrown stuff that's good for them, whether it's products, services, nutrition stuff, but they're not going to eat it or use it just because. You have to really buy in. And the fact that 4 years, I'm very thankful for this guy. Like, we're not just like a client. Like, he was at my daughter's birthday the other day. So it's like, this is more than just training. You know, obviously it's training, but he's a great person, and that led up to a lot of opportunities. And yeah, so here we are, and this is part of it.
Dude, it's crazy how, well, thank you for the opportunity, man. It's crazy how one thing could just explode into everything else. But it's just a matter of like being, it's not even just being in the right place at the right time. I think that's a huge thing, but it's all that time spent that you spent working up to that. The degrees, the time that you just spent day in and day out gave you that opportunity. Like, dude, I love those kinds of things. Because some people, they see that opportunity, go like, bro, how did he get to Justin? And how did he's lucky, whatever. It's like, no.
I had friends call me lucky, like not friends, I say acquaintances. Because my real friends, they know that. But I had an acquaintance one time do that to me. Around the same time period, I was at my facility. He would just pop in. He went to FAU. And my facility was right down from the FAU. And he would pop in every now and then. And he came in and was like, man, it must be nice, man. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, just sitting here in the middle of the day, chilling. I'm like, he thought I was chilling because I had a big screen TV on the top, and I was watching Netflix, but on my laptop, I'm like doing my financial stuff I don't like to do, like accounting type stuff. Like, I can't afford accounting on like a small business, so I just do loan books. So it's like, yeah, I'm watching Netflix doing this, but this is very tedious work when that's not really my job. You know what I mean? Most companies, if you have a regular employment, you're going into a building, you do your specific job, and you leave. Mm-hmm. I'm doing that as well as a marketer, a sales rep, a scientist, because my stuff got to make sense. Because I actually have had many combos with other practitioners. Some agree with me, some don't. And there's been that's a whole other thing. There's been a lot of beef, for lack of a better word, in this industry because, like you initially asked, is more fighters doing this? And I'll get back to that question because I kind of deviated from it, but they are now. And I was saying that story because before that, I looked up things, I saw some things. Like there was a Vasily Lomachenko, who's a boxer. He was doing some stuff. I think Kobe Covington did something with the center down in Miami, but it wasn't like, it was more so like, I'm not explaining it, like in addition, in the sense that they're doing it and they tried it or they did it regularly, but it was just a small fragment. With me, it's like, no, this is not necessarily do it every day or this is the main thing. It isn't. Obviously, you're a fighter. Fighting is your main thing. But it's like, I put it to a pedestal of like, it has to be a part of this. It's not just say you have a toolbox. You're not just going to say, hey, here's a toolbox with 100 different tools. No, I want to give you a toolbox with 10 tools, but they're the tools you need, versus saying, let's use this crazy equipment. I guess what I'm getting at, it's not just like a gimmick, for lack of a better word, like, oh, here's some crazy equipment, lights. No, I want this to be a methodology with rhyme and reason. And I think that's where a lot of headbutt comes from this industry. And I actually been taking a lot of flack because I don't know how much my Instagram you've seen, but I speak how I want this industry only because I know the work I put in. So some people be like, I believe this 100%, Nick. Or they'll be like, you need to humble yourself. And I'm like, hey, people want to hate me or love me, I'm just going to say what I say, So fighters are doing it more. And a lot of them, I can say, are doing pretty well because I'm big on, like, does it make sense? Like, if I go to Dustin, I can't be like, here's some tennis balls. I want you to bounce one left hand, dribble one the right hand, speak Spanish. Like, this is a crazy example, but that's a lot of stuff I see, and I can't walk up to him like that. If you're working with a kid or a lower level athlete, you can do that. Mm-hmm. And I work with kids and lower level athletes, but guess what? A lot of them like it because I'll show them videos like, look what you're doing, look what he's doing. Wait, that's what Dustin's doing? And they're like 12 years old, and they're like blown away that I'm doing these. And it's not that I'm like putting them on Dustin level. It's just the fact that the framework doesn't change. The intensity does. Like a squat's a squat. But if I'm a 6'5", 300-pound lineman, I'm probably squatting 600 pounds versus a kid, he'll squat maybe just dumbbells or something. Right. And that's how I look at it because there's a lot of like, let's just do it because like, let's mimic punches, like punch out a light. And I don't really do stuff like that. I'm more about putting them in the mental premise versus mimicking a punch because that's why they box. That's why they do Muay Thai in practice because that's not what I do. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of the industry, at least in MMA, the brain training, they're trying to mimic fight-specific stuff with reactionary light systems, and I'm a big, against that. So it's taken off, but it's like anything. It's like rap music. 20 years ago, people were like, this is music, and now they're like, oh, this is mumble rap, this is music, and then 20 years before that, they were calling NWA wasn't music. 20 years before that, they were calling James Brown wasn't music. You can go back to the beginning of time, say that cavemen bringing on rocks. That's not music. No matter where you go, they're going to say it's not music. Like Beethoven, his parents that classical stuff, that's not real music. We like this Baroque music,
That's funny. That's an interesting perspective. Do you think there's so much controversy in cognitive coaching because is it newer? Like, how long has it been introduced? It must be. I mean, why is there so much beef, as you say, in it? Like, why are there some different?
So from a non-practitioner side, there's a disconnect because it's different. I can say if you look at in practical use in modern times, I would say the earliest use of how is more technological. I would say at least 20 years, maybe. And as far as just the industry as a whole, I would say that's 50 years because there has been people that use charts and stuff like that and different paperwork. Like they have things called concentration grids, which is a number grid with say 100 numbers all scrambled out of order. And your job is to find them in order and check them off in numerical order. So they were doing stuff like that in the 50s and 60s.
None of the technology.
So the way how you see it with me on my page and everyone else in the industry, I would say the last 20 years, that's become a thing.
So it's pretty new.
So yeah, very new.
So I think because it's so new, certain things aren't as concrete. I mean, that's what makes sense.
Even the peer-reviewed stuff, like the article I sent you, that wasn't on this, but they want to see more of that. And actually, the same post I made maybe 3 days ago and got a lot of attention from the people in the industry. And I'm a pot stirrer. I don't know if you can tell, I like to stir the pot. So I tag pretty much all the movers and shakers because it's a very small field. We all know each other. For lack of a better word, personally. Some of us we've never met in real life. I have these 10 guys, cool or not, whether some I'm cool with, some I'm not, that I've never met. And there's some that I can drive to the facility right now and But the thing is, there's no consensus. Like you said, there's no consensus. Everyone has kind of like their own approach, which is fine. But it's kind of like saying if you're a doctor, there's a way to do a certain surgical procedure. Cool. You might have a better like approach, but the same foundation's there. Like you're not gonna cut them differently.
Right.
You might have like a different prep or whatever, but that incision has to be in the same place because everyone's heart or whatever it is still physiologically there. So I think that's the disconnect because not many people like. I have a strong background. Like I'm not the world leader in neuroscience, but my strongest background I would say is in personality psychology. That's why the article I sent you. That's originally where I built most of my foundation. But then I started doing more coursework in cognitive science. I actually took classes out of my own pocket, paid my own money to take doctoral level classes as a non-degree seeking student at FAU. And all the professors were like, who are you? Because typically you have to be accepted into the program. But I got a loophole and I asked them, can I just do it? And they had to sign off on it. So I would take classes like, I took one called Attention and Consciousness, Working Age and Memory, Close Relationships, which is about how we interact with each other, romantic, friendship, familial, team, etc. And I took these classes because I looked at their catalog and I'm like, what would make sense for Mindbody1? Because this is around the time Mindbody1 was started. And I personally read the descriptions, like, I think these would be perfect. And I paid for those out of my own pocket. So when people like tell me like, oh, what makes you the official? I'm like, hey, you don't got to take my word, but I'm just saying I put that work in because a lot of people, they read a book or an article and they go the next day and talk about it like they've been researching for 10 years. And I feel that does a disservice because you can't teach something you don't fully grasp. You know, I teach stuff. I teach this stuff in my class. And even then, I'm still revamping, like, for a lecture, like, okay, let me see what I can say better. I'm always scrutinizing it, if you will. And I think that's a problem. Until that happens, this mental field will be hard to take seriously because you see someone like in my circle of people in this field, we all have similar methods, may not be the same. You see us, but then you see some other stuff that'd be like maybe just bouncing tennis balls off walls. And I get why people do that because not everyone can afford a $2,000 reaction system like FitLight. I get it. But at the same time, I didn't always have FitLight. So when people come at me for that, I'm like, I didn't have FitLight when I started this. I was doing this in 2012. I used to take tennis balls, write words on them, like positive words and negative words, like win, lose, failure, defeat, success, triumph. And I would spread them out like X amount of yards apart. And it would be a sprint with my football players I work with. I work with some NFL combine prep. And they would sprint to the ball and have a bucket for the positive words, bucket for the negative words. So now we're working on mindset, trying to decipher, okay, failure, negative. Now the under pressure thinking, and it was very simplistic, but obviously, I knew that was something, but I knew it couldn't have been too much because it's just tennis ball, you know what I mean? But I told myself to make this better, I got to level up. I'm not doing those drills anymore. There's a reason for that. And whoever watches this that's in this field, I don't want them to take, because some people are going to know who I'm talking about. So I'm not trying to take shots. It's just that at some point you got to say, yeah, I want to be accessible to the world. At the same time, it has to make sense. And I had to tell myself, does this make sense? If you go back to 2017, there's a lot of drills. If you want to go through 1,000 posts, you watch the first things I did with Dustin to now, I would say at least half of them don't get seen anymore in any of my clients. Because I figured it was like, okay, is this really helping? Or are they just looking cool for a lot of, even my view count went down. Like my followers went up and my view count went down because I started scrutinizing myself saying, yeah, I get a lot of love because people like it. It's flashy, pun intended. But it's like, is it helping them? And I was like, no, it isn't. And through my knowledge and research, it's like, I can do better stuff. So that scrutiny has to come. And I think maybe the mainstream will take it seriously because until it looks real or legit, it's going to get laughed at, including myself. And I'm not afraid to say that. I'm thrown in that category too.
That's so well said, dude. I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a lot to it. I know on Instagram it's so straightforward, but it's a lot more to it than the drills itself. It's like what makes sense. That's always.
I'm so interested in doing this personally. Like I'm in real estate. I'm a realtor. And I'm wondering, even in sales and in business, how you can become more efficient.
Working memory. Have you heard that term before?
I've heard of it, but not.
So working memory, the best analogy I like to use it, like think of it like I go to gym, people say, how much you bench, bro? So think of it like your bench press. Because the stronger your working memory is, the better you can do pretty much any cognitive task. So say selling a house. So working memory is how much information I'm hearing in real time. You have about a minute worth of capacity. So if I say we're walking down the street, or not walking the street, let's say we're at a party and you introduce me to a friend and they're like, hey, my name's Nick. And they're like, hey, my name's John. So for about 30 seconds to a minute, that information is relevant to me. My brain's like, what do I do with it? But after that 30 seconds to a minute is gone and I haven't put any emphasis on what that means, it's going to probably kick it out. Probably, more than likely. Not necessarily. Some people have interesting memories where they still retain that stuff. Like, I kind of do that myself. I can retain stuff. But most people, they're going to be like, okay, John, some guy met through someone else, whatever. Then say a week later, 2 weeks later, you meet John again. Hey, we're at whatever. And now it's like, it's not that you think less of him. It's just that your brain said, is this relevant? So with my students, when I teach this, how I make them make sense of it, I'll use like a celebrity, like, who here likes Beyonce? Oh, I like Beyonce. So you hear me talk and you're like, oh, I don't remember what you taught on the test. And it's like, why don't you remember it? Like, I don't know, it's hard. It's not that it's hard. It's not relative to you. You don't care about it. So you can tell me the lyrics of about to say she likes Beyonce. You can tell me the lyrics of Beyonce song. Why does your brain remember that? Because you deem it relevant. And obviously, the more you like something, the more you're going to want to hear it. The more you hear it, the more it gets ingrained. But if I heard John's name once at a party and I never thought what to do with it, like now if I said this, hey, or you told me, hey, this is John. He's the head of programming at the Florida Panthers. I know where this is. And I might be like, you know what? I should remember that name. Go look it up later. And next time I see John, hey, John, right? And now it's relative to me. And that's what working memory is using that information so we can manipulate what we're saying. So you're hearing me right now. You're using it right now. And then when you say whatever you're going to say, you're going to repeat, not repeat, but you're going to use that information repeating in your head to formulate a response. That's working memory. Real time.
You know what I even do sometimes?
What?
I find it to be so important when someone says their name let's say you're in an office and you meet somebody just got hired and they're working, and you introduce each other or yourselves, and they say their name is Bill and I'm Rafi. A lot of people will forget that person's name the next time around. They're like, oh, what was your name again? Mm-hmm. If you can remember their name and you just say their name the second time you see them,
yep,
it's going to set you apart. They're either going to think that you simply have more of a respect, or that you have a better memory or whatever. But it's that attention and that respect that will make them respect you. They'll appreciate it. So and I'm guilty of doing this for sure. There are times I forget people's names.
I do too.
But what I try to do is, especially if I feel that it's somebody that I really need to remember, I need to build that relationship with, I'll save their number in my phone, and I'll put it as something where I can remember. I'll even screenshot it. So let's say I met them on a Monday, I'll screenshot their name and number, and if I'm like, who is that person? I'll remember that I take screenshots. I'll go back to the screenshot, I'll remember who it is, and then I'll just kind of look at the name for a little bit, and next time I see them, I'll remember it.
See, all kinds of strategies, and that's the beauty of it. And you even indirectly brought up like social evolutionary psychology, because think about it, throughout time, language got developed, and the main role of language is obviously communicate. But why do we need to communicate? We need to keep surviving, and the best way to survive is efficient communication. Mm-hmm. And through time, it was just, how do we stay alive? Hey, don't hit that tree, there's bees in it, or hey, there's a bear over there. That saves our lives. And then it developed, say, in the Middle Ages, like 14, 1500s. How can I use that to get status? Like you said, if there's someone's worth remembering. So when you said that, my brain went to, that's a perfect example, because now our mental performance is dictating now how we can achieve different things in our actual lives. It's not just relegated to direct apply, like reaction time. Oh, I missed the car hitting me, versus you say, how do I understand the move in the world? Because you're able to take that information and manipulate. That's what we call working memory. We manipulate the information, because if I say something like, there's a McDonald's on the corner, you make a right and go down for 2 miles, it's right on the left. So in your head, you're taking that information, you're painting this picture. There's actually 3 components to working memory. If I get into the nerd side of it, there's the episodic buffer, there's the visual spatial sketchpad, and the phonological loop. So what that means is the phonological loop is the auditory part of working memory. So if I give you my number, 954-226-2926, what are you more likely to do until you can type it in or write it down?
Try to repeat it in my head.
Exactly. That's the phonological loop. So you're learning some top level cognitive science right now. So that's the phonological loop. It's the auditory capacity of what we hear in our head, that voice in your head to remember. Now the visual spatial sketchpad, the name kind of gives it away. It's visual. It's the visual component. So let's say, using that same example, making a right at the light, McDonald's on the corner, make a left, go 2 miles. So you're seeing that. You're planning out your drive in your head, saying, okay, I know there's Hollandale Boulevard, McDonald's on my right, make a left, 2 miles, there's a red building. So that's the visual part. And the episodic buffer, that's kind of like an on-ramp or off-ramp on highway. Your long-term memory has all that information. So let's say I'm not really from I'm from North Broward area, but I know enough about Hollywood Boulevard. So it's like I know how that is. So my long-term memory has all that other information. So the episodic buffer says, hey, we just got to make a left at McDonald's. Then it transfers what you already knew about that. What does McDonald's look like? Oh, it's a yellow building. It seems so minute, right? But when you think about this is what your brain's doing every time you think. It's taking all this information and saying, what do we need? Send it up. What do we have? Oh, we have left at McDonald's. Send it back. Okay, McDonald's yellow with the arches. Send it back. Make a right. Send it back. Oh, there's a light. Then there's a red building. You know what I'm saying? So it's literally a real time. And this happens in, going back to what I said at the beginning, milliseconds.
It's crazy.
It sounds like I'm saying a lot. I am, but this happens in milliseconds. That's why the brain is so interesting to me. Like, if I go back to when I was a little kid, I used to do experiments with my friends, not necessarily with the brain, but just like science experiments, like can the length of your leg determine how far you kick a ball? I was always trying to figure out why or how things happen. And actually found in that study of our 3 people sample size that it does. But obviously that means nothing. But you know what I'm saying? It's always in me. Like, why do you think like this? Why do you move like this? Why do you behave like this? And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know?
Dude, it's unbelievable. It's crazy how so many things that you would think take so long to register are happening. Like that.
Always working. That's why I use the bench press analogy. Like, it's something that you want to be able to have a high capacity of, because I can take a more load of items. So how we measure working memory, it would be something like if I gave you 10 words to remember, like say grocery list, lettuce, tomatoes, bacon, eggs, whatever. And I told you in a minute later recite those. That's working memory, because now you got to recall what you heard. Now typically you would remember about 5 to 7 of those. That's just the minimal capacity. But just like anything, can increase that. So when my training, how I carry it over is when I do a drill set with the fit light, instead of just making them react to a light, I'll have an iPad screen with other things going on. So it'll be like an equation, and like I actually did it with Dustin last week, and I'll have like say 4 plus 5, nothing extreme, but the color be either red or blue. It's a picture of Connor, and if it's red, he adds the equation. If it's blue, he subtracts it, and if it's no equation and it's red, he says the opposite color in blue, vice versa. So he's reacting to lights every few seconds. But on that screen, 5 plus or 5 and 4 on the screen is blue. Wait, subtract 1. Oh, react. Then the next one, 3 plus 8 and it's red, and it's like 11. So he's always having to have that load. So the more you can pile on to that, that's just like one level. You can add more variables and be like, every time it is a even number, he does a squat or something. You know what I'm saying? I don't really do too much of that, but you can add more variables by making the answer not only have to be computed, but now it means something. Like, you know what I mean? So
kind of acted of it.
So it's always adding more variables, and that's how we get that capacity up. So people who can take on a lot more information under pressure, and if we can do that, that's the main premise of most of my drills. Is can we get them taking more information and be efficient with that?
I'm really curious to see some of this stuff.
But so, we'll have to, in fact, hopefully
if you could, if it's too much, then.
Oh, I didn't know if we were going to do it like on after we were done or something, because I would have to like get a charge.
Fine. Oh, it's going to take a whole thing. All right, so never mind.
We do like a little clip at the end.
It's a possibility.
Set it up.
I just kind of wanted to show people like kind of how something works, but if it's going to be a big job, we can.
Not a big job. Just I'm just not sure if it's fully charged because it still was in my car from yesterday. I was so tired I just went to sleep. Let's see. Let's take out 2 of them. This is one of the many things.
Let's see how fast or slow I am, huh?
This is one of the many items I use. The tablet that controls it. I know what drill I can do. I mean, actually, you can actually see how fast you are compared to Dustin does. It's a record for this drill, so I'll explain it as it's loading. So basically what's going to happen,
I'm going to embarrass myself.
these 2 lights are going to come on simultaneously. They either be green light or red light.
Okay.
Or both. When it's green, either one, you're going to deactivate it. So this red center, that's the sensor. So your hand needs to come on top. It doesn't have to touch, but it needs to come on the top of that sensor. You know, put your hands back, center to the middle.
Do people usually touch it or hover over it?
Because technically touching is less efficient, so sensor use is the best way.
So you just literally go like this?
Yeah, so as long as your hands are, basically.
So every time it's green, I'm putting my hand over it.
I'm going to show you how it's going to look. But they're both coming on simultaneously, so they might both be. Right. So you have to pay attention. So this is what we call a go, no go task. So if it's green, it's like a light, go. If it's red, don't go. So, let it. So you see it's flashing, that means it's good. Hold on. Okay. Hopefully one of these other ones got some more light. No, also it might be hard for people to see. There we go. So I'll show you how it's going to look.
That's also kind of I'm looking for the word. Okay, no, well, you started already. Let me know when.
So I'm just gonna show you how I say it as it goes. So it's gonna count down. After this green light, then it begins. So 2 at a time. And then when it comes on, so if it's
how
red,
fast is that?
I won't tell you because I want you to have completely objective response. So basically, how you're gonna do it? I want your hands center here, just like that, and always return them to the center. You don't have to put weight down, but they need to touch back here, waiting. So every time you go, it's from that point.
Gotcha.
All right. So this is exactly how we do it. So I'm gonna tell you how you measure up to the pros. So it's gonna count down first, then it'll begin. 2, 1, now. Okay, nice restraint.
That's lit.
All right. So your score, yours should have been 23 total hits. So you got all of them. You didn't hit any wrong ones. You almost did though. There's a few. We call those false positives. So luckily you restrained yourself so it didn't count against you. Now, accuracy is always first. So that's 100% accuracy. Now after that, time.
Right.
That's what we want to know. So your time was 0.368. So 0.3 of a second. 368 tenths of a second. Now, where's that measure? Good, the bad, the ugly. For anyone, regardless of ability, I want to see under 4 tenths of a second. So for general population, pass. But you don't want to just be good. You want to be great. So, you ready for this?
Tell me how.
For the athletes, so like I said, general pop, under 4. Athletes, I need under 0.32. So you're not too far off. 3, because you're talking about literally milliseconds here. So that's not a big jump, but in the game of speed, it is. So it's good and bad at the same time, because it means you can definitely get there. It just means you ain't close yet. You ain't far.
Yeah.
Now, elite, meaning the Dustins, the Jareds, that caliber, I'll tell you where they at. So the record is actually by Dustin Poirier. He did 0.242. So less than a quarter of a second.
So as soon as the light just...
He's gone. Because this is the thing. Your brain is wanting to factor in what not to do, and that's still working miracles. Everything comes back to
That's what I'm thinking. You know what it is for me? Part of my speed is based on not wanting to touch the wrong thing. So I'm focusing, half of my focus is don't go too fast because then you might touch the wrong one.
The more you give conscious effort to the task, that's actually a term. It's a book by, I won't say her name wrong. I think it's Sion Baylock called Choke. She's amazing. I read her work way back in 2013, 2014, and she gave me a lot of inspiration, indirectly for this. In her book, Choke, she used a term called paralysis by analysis.
Analysis paralysis.
So
yes, I love that term.
What happens is, the reason that happens is because when it comes to general motor learning, when we're learning any skill, let's use riding a bike. That's probably the most typical skill we can use. Almost every kid learns at some point. So I'm attending to the pedals, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, right? But once you get used to riding a bike, it's just go.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're a beginner, you're typically wobbling, you're all over the place, you're not keeping your balance because you're giving so much conscious effort to the direct motor physical movements. And you can even take the same concept to like an NBA player. Why do they miss free throws? Choking isn't really necessarily about being good or bad. It's about how much kind of load are we using. That working memory word going to keep coming up in this conversation because if I'm giving a lot of attention or load to get my elbow right, release point, you've done this a million times. Why are you thinking about it now? So the more load you give to the the internal capability, the less likely you're going to do it efficiently. That's why that happens. So going back to this drill, if you're giving a lot of conscious attention to green, red, not green, not red, so that's going to happen versus just knowing greens go, and that's just put in the back of your mind.
You know that this just blows up a whole conversation for me. So you mentioned bike riding. When I think of a car, driving a car, it's the same concept. For the first year, no, not year, a couple of months, whatever it is, you're still focusing on certain. You always have to focus on the road, obviously, but there's a lot more cognitive thought in each action versus once you've been doing it for long enough. I'm just kind of expounding on what you're saying because you already said it, but I'm giving my understanding. At a certain point, you've done it so much and you've gotten so good at it where all of those extra conscious actions are kind of out the door and your brain is working on autopilot, and then you can be so much more efficient.
Yep.
Or it's not to say that you shouldn't be conscious of the action, but you can now focus more on the brain aspect of it, which is so interesting.
That goes back to that working memory. You have more load to work with.
But that only happens with time over task. You just have to do it enough. So, for instance, this time, tell me if I'm wrong, but with this exercise right now, it's my first time doing it. So I know without question that
just from
if I do it long enough, I'm obviously going to make some mistakes, I imagine. But if I did this 200 times, there's no question I'd be better at it than I am now.
But the second thing after that's a good point. So, like, I'm a researcher, and that's what we look at. So, obviously, that is true. That's called the practice effect. You get better at what you practice. But we want to see good variability. So, when you do this 200 times, how much variance is between those scores? So, let's say out of that 200 times, your variance was like 50%, meaning almost half the time you were getting higher or lower scores. So that tells me, yeah, you got better, but you weren't consistent with it. So that's why over time, using Dustin or Jared as an example, I've done probably most sessions between those two guys of all my clients. And it's like, I'll look at their numbers and I'll see you hit this range very consistently. So yeah, they got better because they've done it with me for the last, Jared, I think almost 3 years and Dustin 4 years. So obviously they're going to be better than that person like never done it.
Right.
But what I want to see now that you've gotten better in say a month, how consistent can you keep hitting it? That's what we want to know. So I tell people reaction time is important, but the biggest tell for performance, at least in the mental space, well, in any space, but especially the mental space, is variance. How consistently can you hit that range? Because if you're all over the place, going back to what I said at the beginning, I'm big on bringing things full circle.
Yeah.
If you can't consistently do it, not every time, obviously, but more than likely, how can I depend on you? If you can't make that shot 96%, how can I depend on you? If you can't make that pitch or hit that, whatever it is, I can't depend on you. No one can be 100% dependable, but if I have athlete A whose variance is 55 and athlete B whose variance is 20, I'm going with him. He's more likely to not be all over the place. The higher that variance means you're not consistent. And that's what another takeaway, I actually probably never said that before on any of my podcasts I've done in the past, is that's what we look for. And a lot of coaches, if you're watching this, I'm definitely going to share this, and if they can have an open mind, is you got to look at that stuff. I don't care if your athlete did, he did 0.2 seconds, but he only did it 2 or 3 times, versus he did 0.28, which is slightly slower, but he was able to do it every time. Who do you want? I want that guy.
Without a doubt. So I got a question for you. Putting you on edge now. What do you think that Dustin is going to do for his third fight, based on the coaching, based on what he's been doing, that'll give him an edge over Conor?
Well, given this fight, it's been a little harder getting sessions as well. And that's something I've come to understand in general because things don't take a back seat. So what I try to do when I do get the time with them is to emphasize things that are going to have a lot of changing variables. So I won't do too much like this stuff. I'll do maybe at the end, but the main, like do an hour or so. So the main time I'll spend doing the task like the one I described earlier, where there's multiple things going on. So those type of things, the reason I emphasize those the most because the brain doesn't like instability. If we go just to our existence over time, evolution, our brain wants consistency. The term homeostasis, that means bringing everything back to balance, right? Just standing up, that's breaking homeostasis because now the muscle contraction, the heart rate increase, even if it's only like a little bit, brain likes to be steady. So I like to put it in a state of unsteadiness. So I emphasize a lot of that stuff because, especially in sports like MMA, or MMA in general, not sports like it, there's no consistency in that sport. I could beat you in like 8 to 12 different ways. Like most sports, there's only really one way to win.
Yeah.
Like in basketball, you only win by shooting buckets. With 3-pointers, yeah, more, but it's the same.
I think that's like a big reason why I enjoy it so much because of the unpredictability.
You feel me?
Like,
of course, I can knock you out. I could choke you out.
You could also have a fighter who's so much less experienced get that. I wouldn't say necessarily lucky, but yeah, sometimes you get a lucky hit and it's like it's over in a matter.
Definitely guys who came into this UFC, I would say, particularly because that's the one I'm more familiar with, that aren't 10-year vets, and then they knock out a guy who's heavy favorite, but then their next 2-3 fights, matter of fact, I don't know this guy at all in real life, but I saw him fight a few years ago. He's no longer in the UFC. I think his name was James Vick, I believe. Yeah. And he's a tall, lengthy guy, like 6'3", but he's a lightweight, 155. So that's very rare to have someone that tall, but he was very lanky, so he didn't have a lot of mass. And I forget who he beat, but it was a notable person. This is like 2018, I think, or 2017. And it's like he moved up in the rankings. But it's not a nod to him. Like I said, I don't know nothing about him personally, but he's no longer in the UFC because he went on like a 4-fight win streak after that. He got to fight Justin Gage at some point, which was a big fight for him. If he had won that, who knows where he would be right now, but he got beat that. And it's like, it goes to your point, you can't call it. And that's why I think the best fighters understand that. Like, you can have that confidence, obviously. No one's going to be like, man, I hope I don't get knocked out. No. But in your head, it's like, I know my ground game's amazing, but what about that stand, or vice versa, my stand? You got to be ready for all that. And that's why my drills, I don't mimic the fight variability aspects. I mimic the brain variability. Like, how much can I make you think in different ways in the least amount of time? And if I can do that and make you uncomfortable with it, and you get to the point where you can still give me times that I need, like giving Dustin with that same drill I mentioned with the counter picture and the peripheral vision reaction, his times will be like around like half a second on that. That drill's a little different. So obviously this one's 0.2, but depending on the drill. But for that drill, 0.5 is extremely fast, half a second. And he hits those numbers every week. So I want to see that. Now, if he went to 0.6, there's different factors. He might have just not been feeling it that day, and that's fine. But the beauty is, if he's not feeling it that day, and he still can give me 0.5, I like that. I'll ask him things like, how you feeling today? I genuinely want to know. It's not like I'm just saying to experiment, but it's like, I take that into consideration because he says, yeah, man, I've been hitting it hard this week, a lot of wrestling, a lot of this, or whatever it may be. And then he still give me those times. I'm like, wow. Because typically that will affect things. So if it does affect it, I know. And if it doesn't affect it, that's even better.
Yeah, bro. So Nick, thank you so much. As you notice, like one thing I've realized about episodes where I don't know a lot about the topic, I tend to talk a lot less than the guest, which is a good thing. It might not be as entertaining for the viewers, but for me, I mean, and I hope for everyone else that they learned a lot because this is obviously something you know tons about. So I've learned a lot. I'm very interested in doing more of this for myself, even though I'm not an athlete. I mean, I do. I'm a weightlifter for sure. I go 6 days a week, so I'm very into that. Well, I can't live without it.
Well, so all types of population. Athletes are just probably the most notable.
Yeah. So I'm definitely interested in doing it for work in general as a realtor. I would love to be more efficient in every respect. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm calling you out on the episode, hoping that I do get Justin also, bro. But listen, I'm sure I'm sure you're a busy guy. He's a busy guy, but that would be amazing if I could get him too. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed coming on.
Great.
Thank you, man.
All right.